international action in response to that, despite the large numbers of deaths. The second thing that can be done is you can leave it to the region. You can hope that the region sorts it out, and indeed that's what the African Union has been asked to do. The African Union mission in Sudan, AMIS, was originally deployed in June 2004, initially with a force of 150. By mid-2005, its numbers have been increased to 7,000. As the territory it's trying to deal with is approximately the size of France, however, this has not made much of an impact, and the force has been manifestly unable to stop the violence, demonstrated not least by the attack on Saturday night, Sunday morning in Afghanistan. The third thing that the international community can do is impose sanctions. The Security Council imposed an arms embargo on all non-governmental entities and individuals, including the Janjaweed, operating in Darfur from 30th of July 2004. The sanction regime was strengthened in 2005, which expanded the scope of the arms embargo and imposed additional measures, including a travel ban and assets freeze on 4 individuals, including 2 rebel leaders, a former Sudanese Air Force chief, and the leaders of pro-government militia. The fourth thing that can be done is international criminal prosecutions. And despite reticence by the United States, following a recommendation by a UN Commission of Inquiry, in March 2005, the Security Council referred the situation in Darfur to the International Criminal Court and ordered Sudan to cooperate with the court's investigations. On the 2nd of May of this year, the ICC issued arrest warrants for crimes against humanity and war crimes allegedly committed by former Minister of State for the Interior of the Government of Sudan and current Minister of State for Humanitarian Affairs, Ahmad Haroun, and the Janjaweed commander, Ali Mohammed Ali al-Rahman. The fifth thing that the international community can do is try and cultivate peace talks, and Jordan's highlighted one of the most important ones coming up soon. It took 7 rounds of peace talks before a peace agreement was signed by the government and one faction of the Sudanese Liberation Army or movement, SLA Sachem, in May of 2006, but this was both weak in content and lacking in support on the ground. And indeed, in the second half of 2006, attacks on civilians and NGO workers increased dramatically and security dropped to its lowest level since the beginning of the conflict. The next round of peace negotiations will be held, as we heard, in Tripoli, Libya, beginning on the 27th of October. The deterioration in the situation towards the end of 2006 led to the sixth thing that the international community can do, which is deploy peacekeepers. And on the 16th of November 2006, high-level consultations in Addis Ababa led to a recommendation to augment the African Union mission and deploy a hybrid UN-AU peacekeeping operation by the name of UNAMID. It took some number of months before private and public diplomacy led to Sudan's acceptance of this force in June 2007, and in its formal establishment through a Security Council resolution adopted at the end of July 2007. In theory, the 3-phase deployment should be complete by the end of December of this year, with a troop strength of 20,000, in addition to 6,000 approximately civilian police and a significant civilian presence. There are 2 interesting things about this hypothetical peacekeeping force. It remains hypothetical at the moment. The first is the mandate includes a mandate to contribute to the protection of civilians under imminent threat of physical violence and to prevent attacks against civilians within its capability and areas of deployment without prejudice to the responsibility of the government of Sudan, which can be read by a force commander on the ground in 150 different ways, and maybe that's something we can talk about, what will happen in terms of the willingness actually to put one's life on the line in order to protect the civilian in a territory like Darfur. The second interesting thing about the peacekeeping operation is that part of the negotiations led to a requirement that it be composed primarily of African forces. And this is partly because it was seen as more politically acceptable to Sudan, but it partly also reflects the political reality of what is sometimes called peacekeeping apartheid, which is one way of saying that Western countries were unlikely to send troops to Sudan anyway. The key question today, in terms of the peacekeeping operation, is whether these troops will actually be supplied. Following the weekend's attack in Haskalata, which killed 10 African Union forces, 2 of the member states of the African Union who had supplied forces are now thinking twice about increasing their support. The President of Senegal, Abdoulaye Wade, said on Monday that he would consider pulling out his 538 troops if they were not adequately equipped and empowered to defend themselves, and was certainly thinking twice about increasing that number to around 1,600 under the UN banner. Nigeria, which had the largest numbers of troops in Darfur and has also suffered the largest number of casualties, including 7 on Sunday morning, is also reconsidering its position. So is any of this making a difference? Well, probably the main thing that's making a difference is something I haven't really referred to, which is the humanitarian relief operation. We've heard that 200,000 people have died, millions of lives have been ruined, but it would have been far worse without the massive humanitarian relief effort. The African Union Force clearly hasn't brought peace, and the African Union Force commander himself, Martin Luther Agwai, said yesterday that he feared that the African Union Force was outnumbered and outgunned, and was concerned that the situation wouldn't be radically different by the end of the year, given fears that the much-promised numbers of troops would not in fact turn up. Economic and arms embargoes, economic sanctions and arms embargoes may have contained the conflict somewhat, but it's hard to tell what impact they are having. The ICC indictments that I referred to have not led to a single arrest. The Security Council's political involvement has been complicated by the role of China, one of Sudan's few friends, and maybe that's something that we'll talk about, in particular following pressure on China given the Olympic Games coming up next year, that appear to have moved it at least slightly in terms of its policy on Darfur. And this peacekeeping operation, as I've already highlighted, lays the foundation for a possible framework within which peace negotiations might continue, but it's far from clear that the promised troops will in fact turn up. In the long term, what we clearly need is a peace to keep, and here the greatest hope has to be that the October 27 meetings in Tripoli can deliver that. But the rest I'll leave as a provocation and conversation, and I'm of course looking forward to hearing from both Philip and Solomon, who have experience on the ground. Thank you.